Good day, everyone. I am Paul Donato, CRO here at the ARF, and welcome to our session today, preparing for Google's 2024 privacy changes. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank OptiMine for sponsoring today's event. Excuse me. We'll also be recording this event, and we'll be sending a link out in the next few days. Today, we're going to have presentations by Matt Voda of OptiMine and Samuel Sokolowski from Domino's, and then we'll have a panel discussion for Q&A. As always, should be a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free at any time to put questions in, and we'll try to address as many of them as we can. Before we start, just to let you know that we have a forecasting event coming up, Overcoming Data Limitations and Enhancing Model Performance, that will be held on July 17th from 12 to 2. And you can go to the ARF website to register for that. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, Matt Voda, CEO of OptiMine. Matt brings deep experience and a proven track record of cloud-based technology and analytics success to his role at OptiMine. Matt joined OptiMine from United Health Group, where he led consumer marketing. He's led consumer marketing within the $40 billion Optum division. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning if you're on the West Coast. I'm Matt Voda. I'm the CEO of OptiMine, and we're getting together today to talk all about Google's privacy changes and their implications, but also how Domino's approaches their own marketing measurement. And we have a lot of interesting information to cover, so let's dive in. So today we'll start by providing a brief overview of the Privacy Sandbox and what it is, and then also an update on where Google stands from a timeline standpoint in terms of its rollout. From there, we'll share some results from some in-market testing and tracking to see some of the early impacts and also where industry adoption rates stand currently. And then I'll turn it over to Domino's to have them present about how they think about privacy-safe measurement, how they approach their own analytics practice. And then Paul will lead us in a fireside chat to speak to some of the common industry questions, as well as your questions that you submit along the way today. So with that in mind, just a reminder that you can use the Zoom chat tools to submit questions as we go through today's presentation. Okay, a quick word about OptiMine. We're a leading measurement and optimization solution. We help brands such as Amazon, Best Buy, Crate & Barrel, Tommy Hilfiger, and others measure the incremental impacts of their marketing and then optimize their mix for performance improvement. And we, like all of you, are keenly interested in Google's changes. And today's topic is near and dear to our hearts because the brands we serve are impacted by these major changes. So we watch these changes closely since they'll impact the entire marketplace. Okay, so let's dive in. What are these changes exactly? The sad cookie monster on the right does speak to the fact that Google will be phasing out third-party cookies in Chrome and also in Android. You know, a lot of the market and industry commentary has really been focused on Chrome, but the Privacy Sandbox is much broader, includes Android, which is about half of the US mobile market as well. But it isn't just about cookies, as the Privacy Sandbox is much broader. It's a larger privacy initiative covering the prevention of identifying individual consumer data, using fingerprinting. Many ad tech solutions try to thwart these restrictions by finding other ways to uniquely identify a user. And by the way, Apple's been doing this kind of fingerprinting prevention now for about 3 years. Also, with the Privacy Sandbox moves, they're aiming to prevent the sharing of individual identifiers among ad tech and martech players. And this also includes a number of new technologies to replace the cookie-based identification with more safe approaches, more private approaches to things like ad targeting, using content topics. You can think of contextual advertising to serve more relevant ads. Certainly a new approach to retargeting that doesn't rely on individual user IDs and tracking. And of course, marketing attribution of Google-driven ads. And I think the key there is the word Google-driven. So the great thing that Google has done with all of this is it's been extremely transparent, very well documented, and they've sought public input along the way. Anyone can go to the privacysandbox.com site and see all the details, updates, documentation. It's all out there for public review. Okay, so from a timing perspective, if you feel like this is taken forever to roll out, you'd be correct. I feel like we've been talking about this for quite some time. There have been several false starts and related delays over the last few years, and really the delays reflect the magnitude of the changes being made and the significance of the impacts that these changes will have on the entire ecosystem. So, Google is really being intentionally cautious with the rollout. In any case, the timeline here is their most current. So I'll call out a few things. Full cookie deprecation has been pushed recently to early 2025. It originally was slated for this year, but they pushed it back until early next year. This latest delay is dependent on how UK's competitive regulatory body is reviewing the privacy sandbox for anti-competitiveness reasons. In the meantime, Google will continue to do more live testing in the market in 2024, which they've already started to do. So things are really still dependent on that regulatory review to ensure that the privacy sandbox doesn't actually give Google more advantages from the perspective of kind of both sides of the auction that they already play on. And lastly, I put a link in here for your reference where you can check the timeline over time. They post status updates here, so if you're ever wondering where this kind of sits, you can hit this link. And then also on that note, Caitlin from ARF has put a link in the Zoom chat here. We put together a reference page for all the resources and information sources that we mentioned in today's presentation. So you can go to that page and look at the sources for many of the references that we use in the presentation today. Okay, so if we're looking at 2025 for a full rollout, it suggests that things are kind of on hold. But the reality is that many of the aspects of the privacy sandbox are already live. Late last year, 2023, Chrome version 1.15 included full support for the privacy sandbox. So the browser, Chrome as a browser, is already live and ready, so to speak, to use privacy sandbox. And then earlier this year, Google intentionally shut off 1% of third-party cookies, which impacted about 30 million users worldwide, which just gives you a sense for the immense scale and impact that this is going to have. 1% is 30 million users. So then, since many of the APIs of the privacy sandbox are already live, and Chrome as a browser is now working with the privacy sandbox plumbing, a large percentage of the world's largest sites have already adopted the privacy sandbox and are already using it. As of last week, I checked this late last week, about 38% of top sites are already live with privacy sandbox. And I've included a link here to a tracker from a company called Sincera, which has set up a tracker using the largest 56,000 public-facing websites in the world. And they kind of break down the various usage of the sandbox APIs. They update that regularly. You can always check on that as well. So in a lot of ways, the market is really way ahead of Google's own timeline as players try to get out ahead of this major change and prepare for kind of this big switch that is coming up soon. All right, so why do we care about any of this? Well, it depends on who you are, what role you play in the marketing ecosystem, And so we've outlined some of the major impacts by constituent here. Starting with the publishers on the left-hand side, there's an impact on the ability to serve targeted ads that also impacts the performance of those ads, that advertisers are keenly interested in, and thereby potentially the CPMs a publisher can charge. So now I'll note this is very early testing. So we need to take some of this data with a big grain of salt. And also keep in mind that we're really early days in terms of the rollout of Privacy Sandbox, and there really hasn't been a lot of optimization done yet. But a very well-designed in-market test built and conducted by Boston University has shown that the use of a cookieless-based approach to serve ads resulted in an 85% reduction in clicks, about a 79% reduction in post-click conversions. So, tying a click all the way through to a resulting conversion, saw a drop there as well. But I think that this last stat is probably the most interesting outcome. Despite a huge drop in clicks and post-click conversions, there was only a 6% drop in incremental conversions, meaning conversions that wouldn't have happened without the ad exposure, that were truly incrementally driven by the ad that was served. And you asked the question, well, how could that possibly be? A massive drop in clicks and kind of click tracked conversions. Why is there such a relatively small drop in actual incremental conversions? Well, I'll get into this in more detail in a minute, but I think the simple answer is that this means that clicks are an absolutely horrible way to measure performance. They're just not accurate. And I'll come back to that in more detail in a few slides. But I think that's kind of a big takeaway from some early research is that, a lot of the plumbing around the ad tech world is really kind of viewing clicks as the currency of performance. And that is not the right way to kind of evaluate whether an ad is working or not. So shifting then from publishers to consumers and in a consumer viewpoint, I think it's fair to say that there will be an increase in privacy for users of Chrome and Android as individual consumer tracking is greatly reduced. But probably also fair to say that ads will be less relevant and certainly less precisely targeted. So, there's a trade-off to be made here after all. And, those are kind of two ends of the same continuum, kind of that precision that the cookies have been providing all along and just the targeting that's used to serve ads to individual users. Next, if we look at ad tech and MarTech players, what we expect to see is what we call kind of sector-based losses, meaning major parts of the ecosystem are going to shut down or have to kind of replace the way they function historically. And we're already seeing this. Last week, Oracle announced that they're shutting down their entire advertising business. And this is after investing over $4 billion over the last decade to build this business and acquire all the pieces and components to put this solution together. Why? Why would they shut that down? Well, if the entire plumbing relies on individual user tracking and that goes away, there's no way to keep doing business. And so, it's a pretty simple thing here. Those components in the Oracle solution were relying heavily on cookies and user identifiers, and that picture is getting spottier and spottier. So they shut it down. We also saw last year, Nielsen shuttered their multi-touch attribution platform, which, by the way, was one of the largest players in the marketing attribution space. Same problem. When the solution relies heavily on tracking and that data goes away, so does the solution. So I think it's fair to say we're going to see a lot more of this. There's an enormous amount of plumbing in the market that relies on these cookie-based capabilities and the data around individual users, and we're going to see more of these what we call sector-based losses. Now here's where we would expect to see a few more casualties. If you think about all the platforms and tools that you use today that rely on clicks in some form or fashion to look at performance reporting, and literally it's everything from web analytics, ad platform reporting, all the metrics you track and reports you build and generate and publish to your executive teams. It's in everything. And if you're relying on that data to make decisions or to assess the ROI of your marketing investments, you can see why this thing is such a massive snowball rolling downhill, getting larger and larger. So we expect to see a reset on the standards in the standard ways that brands have traditionally assessed performance, and resulting shifts in the decisions that happen as a result. And so that obviously impacts all of you who advertise. Loss of precision and targeting and personalization, maybe more expense and investment required to move to more first-party data, and more investments to capture and maintain that data. And as we've outlined, of course, a huge hit to click-based or last-click reporting and measurement. And Google's changes certainly are going to take more of that data out of the ecosystem and put more and more pressure on all these capabilities. All right, so just to put a final point on the click-based tracking paradigm, we all know a lot of the marketing world revolves around last click. It's the most easily explained, kind of performance monitoring approach, and very widely used. It's kind of default for digital measurement. And this, despite an enormous amount of evidence that it's just not a good idea. And I'll just highlight that. Northwestern University and Meta published research last year that was centered on ways to find better alternatives to last click measurement. And actually, Brett Gordon, professor at Northwestern University, spoke at a recent ARF event earlier this summer about this research. And what it showed, among many things, was that the measurement error of last click is a ghastly 167%, meaning that the answer being provided by last touch attribution was wrong by 167% on average. And guess what? I mean, if this isn't enough to stop using last click, as I said earlier, it's going to get worse with Google's changes. So despite that, still remains kind of the bedrock, the lingua franca, the currency for how digital performance is assessed. Okay, now, how should we think about moving forward, knowing we need to move to a more privacy-safe approach given the changes in the market? Well, that's where Samuel from Domino's will share best practices, and I'll turn it over to Samuel in a minute. But first, I'd like to take a poll and just see where all of you are at with regards to your own adaptation kind of changes. First question is really, how ready are you and your brand for this? And take a minute using Zoom's pop-up and answer the poll, and we'll get results here in real time. I guess the good news is that most of you aren't in the what privacy changes bucket, and it's okay to admit you are. This is anonymous, so feel free to. Marketers are procrastinators. I know I am. So maybe some of you aren't quite there yet in terms of your readiness. Okay. We'll let results come in, but it looks like so far, most of you are kind of on that journey. Planning started, changes have begun, which is good. Maybe some of you got started last year before the latest delay. The good news is you got a head start. All right, and then we have a second question here. And it's really, have you begun to change your marketing measurement approach in light of privacy changes? And so anywhere from no changes planned to yes. And it looks like the vast majority of you are already making changes, or you plan to do so in the next 3 to 6 months, which is great. And maybe for the 19% of folks, you've already made changes and you're way ahead of the ball game, which is great. Okay, well, good. Thanks everyone for answering that poll.
Very good. Thanks so much, Matt. That was terrific. Now I'd like to introduce Samuel Solokowski, Manager, Marketing Science, Global Analytics and Insights at Domino's. Samuel oversees media measurement for hundreds of millions of dollars in national advertising spend. He joined Domino's 6 years ago and leads a team of dedicated to advancing Domino's marketing measurement capabilities through a variety of techniques: marketing mix modeling, national promotional and product optimization, performance, media, lift testing, and causal analysis. Please welcome Samuel.
Thank you so much. And just wanted to quickly, as I begin, thank you for ARF and OptiMine for sponsoring this event. Happy to be here to be talking about this. And wanted to, for those who aren't familiar, please do get familiar with Domino's. We have delicious pizza. As I'm going to be talking through this, I wanted to first lay the initial ground kind of base for where Domino's is coming from, because depending on the company that you're representing, you may be coming from either a very similar place or a little bit different place in terms of measurement. And really, it really does matter the type of company that you're coming from in terms of what will be kind of your best KPIs. And what I'll be talking about is really kind of zooming way out at a high level, talking about media measurement in general, and then zooming into some specific types of KPIs and kind of the strengths and weaknesses of those different KPIs within marketing measurement. And then, towards the end, I'll be actually a little bit more closely addressing some of the concerns of that are more applicable to the Google privacy changes. And just to set up where Domino's is coming from, Domino's is a top QSR advertiser in both traditional TV, as well as a top digital advertiser on many of the digital marketing platforms. Domino's has leveraged the MMM and lift testing as a key part of our measurement strategy for many years. I believe, I'm a little bit cautious with my language here, but I believe we run the most statistically controlled trials of any other QSR and more than any other advertiser on multiple of the top digital platforms. We have a deep-seated test and learn culture and marketing science, and really that's really supported throughout our company. Every little change on our website really does go through a very rigorous testing methodology. Just doing some crude math, I believe half of all Americans have had Domino's each year. So chances are half of the people in this room have had Domino's this year. Most Americans are aware of the Domino's brand. And again, this is going to be very relevant for the types of KPIs that are important to Domino's and to companies like Domino's. And most of our sales are repeat business, which again is also going to have strong ramifications for measurement. And again, just want you to view with this context, the rest of the presentation really is going to be viewed through this lens. So ever since the dawn of business, people have intuitively known that marketing works. People have set up shops. They have increased their visibility. They've held up signs. They've yelled about their product. They've sent out pamphlets. They've even gone so far as, in pumping smells throughout their store or out into, around their store. And again, this has been done because people know that marketing works. And although we know that marketing works, we've really always been on this quest, this continuous quest to have the most effective media strategy possible. Because we don't want to spend all of our time yelling about our products in the streets if there's a more efficient way. We really, again, intuitively are on this journey to try to be more and more efficient with our marketing. So again, the basic, street vendor would be asking the question, I want to sell more. What should I do to make people want it the most? And that then gets translated into something a little bit more sophisticated as they think about it a little bit more. In that, in order to maximize my profitability, the question is, what is the optimum marketing strategy? And each of these elements is going to be kind of broken out and explained by different KPIs. At Domino's, being a very supportive brand of our franchisees, our question is a little bit reframed in that what we're trying to do is to achieve the greatest near-term and lifetime value, return to profitability back to our franchisees. So in other words, we're seeking the optimum marketing strategy that maximizes our franchisees' profit while minimizing the marketing spend to achieve that. And again, there's a host of KPIs that we can use to pursue this. One of those would be clicks, but there's a lot of opportunities to be able to pursue this. And I'm going to maybe coin some new terms, so just bear with me as I'm using a little bit different language, kind of intentionally. And I'm going to break these KPIs into a couple of different categories. The first two of these are going to be obviously causal KPIs. So again, this gets back to that kind of intuition that marketers have about what is actually going to drive more sales. And a lot of times these are talked about as upper and mid funnel measurements. And being exposed to a lot of different brands and a lot of the conversation around what different brands are using for their measurement, what seems to be the case is a lot of brands are just kind of picking their favorite KPIs, which they know are going to cause higher or lower sales. So, as I listed here, these include things like brand awareness, top of mind, purchase intent, impressions. Is it attention grabbing, ad wear out? Is it forgettable, et cetera, et cetera? And again, kind of want to emphasize that what seems to be the case is people are just kind of picking their favorite KPIs and going with it. Another category is optimization equation KPIs, and I really struggle to wordsmith this, but just think of it as, again, inherently part of that optimization equation. If you were to try to write out the algebra for what is your optimization term, it would be all of those KPIs that directly influence that equation. And these are sometimes bucketed within lower funnel. And again, what seems to be the case is people are picking, some companies are picking their favorite KPI, which is essentially part of that optimization equation, or trying all of them at once. And that's definitely something that we've seen where there's like a million KPIs that are all kind of flashed, and we will go through all of the different KPIs. It becomes kind of death by KPI. So these include things like searches, clicks, website visits, conversions, attributed conversions, and spend. And again, we know that all of these are important KPIs, and they're part of what makes successful marketing. But what I would say is by themselves, they're fundamentally really not even close to answering that full question of an optimum strategy. We have to have more of a holistic picture across them. So in addition to those two, I would group these additional three categories. The first one would just be a holistic combination of the first two. So those things which cause sales and those that are part of the optimization equation, and kind of combining those algebraically. And this is just kind of a silly example that would be way oversimplified, but it would be something like the change in the number of people who are aware of your product or your brand times the percentage of people who liked the brand would equal the number who are aware and who liked it. And you would then subsequently go from the top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom of the funnel, kind of algebraically understanding all the interrelationships of that kind of more complicated algebraic optimization term. And what I would say here, while it includes the causal and kind of the optimization term, super complicated. So I'd be super interested in anybody who's making something like this work. For Domino's, what we will typically rely to try to encapsulate the entirety of the funnel is controlled trials. And we're going to break those out a little bit more. And then also media mix modeling. All of the major KPIs have some major limitations and some major opportunities areas within them. In the obviously causal KPIs, again, not all of the parts of the optimization are considered, and it's difficult to adequately consider all the trade-offs between the different causal KPIs. For the optimization equation KPIs, again, sometimes bundled into lower funnel, the best strategy is very similar to the one earlier, but the best strategy as defined by one KPI can vary well and is actually very often worse by another KPI. But what I'd say is, even more critical is that it is inherently not incremental. And we'll talk about where that becomes kind of more important depending on the company that you're representing. For the combinations of KPIs, those causal and the optimization equation KPIs or upper and lower funnel, what I would say is in order to make that math work, there's a lot of assumptions and really a lot of data collection that'd be required to capture all of those funnel elements as you go throughout the funnel. So that's probably the most intensive in terms of actually collection of data. In the controlled trial category, I'm going to simplify this and just kind of bin this into two different categories. What I would say is this is where Domino spends a ton of our time, and we're a leader at leveraging these across many marketing partners. But I would bin them into lift testing and more like categorical groupings through a causal inference. So the most common of these would be a GOX type testing. Some of the advantages of GOX or these other categorical testing controlled trials would be that it gets the majority of the impact, provided you've got a good setup. So it's kind of all encompassing of the financial impact. One of the major limitations is it's typically one channel at a time. Obviously you can do more, but it becomes more and more complicated as you do more, and the sensitivity kind of erodes. And one of the major difficulties here is there's only so much of this type of testing you can do because it typically requires a large effect size, might not be totally representative of how you normally buy your media. And one of the most difficult areas of this is if you use any sort of time series approach, your past tests may pollute your future tests. Which, again, it becomes very difficult to decide which of these kinds of categorical tests you're going to run. In lift testing, this suffers from some PII limitations. And what I would say is that always, and I'm air quotes around always, but almost always understates the value of media. There are some people who will model and kind of scale up the resultant incremental return on ad spend. But again, base lift testing always understates. One of the major difficulties with lift testing is it's extremely difficult to compare these across different channels because the PII limitations are underscaling at an unknown amount, and it's different between partners. It becomes very difficult to compare apples to apples. And then finally, media mix modeling as a category. This really accomplishes the goal of having a normalized kind of trade-off of value across all partners simultaneously. So it accomplishes that goal, but typically it is pretty slow. There's a lot of data collection, cleansing, etc. that's involved in it. It can also be prone to overfitting, especially on lower funnel. So you can think of, again, I mentioned clicks as one of the things within the optimization equation KPI, which is to say, again, clicks and things like that are basically the same thing as a sale, or they're part of the process in getting a sale. Well, because of that collinearity, a model is going to be prone to overfitting on it. And another thing is it's not easy to do a quick turnaround and iterative testing because you need a lot of time to learn. And for the top-down approach to be able to reach sensitivity levels, be able to pick up that there's incremental return. And one caution I would say is sometimes, maybe often, these models will violate some of the assumptions in the modeling technique itself. So things like collinearity between your marketing or control variables can be problematic and really need to be carefully feature engineered. All right, so I mentioned at the beginning the type of company that Domino's is, and this is one of the areas where this becomes pretty important. And this is just kind of a general principle. As base sales increase, so the sales that you have kind of aggregated as a company, attribution KPIs are going to become less insightful. And you really typically, and Domino's especially, needs to lean on incrementality measurement in order to be able to get the sensitivity to be able to know whether or not your test or your strategy is driving greater benefit. So again, just to kind of reiterate this, as base sales increase, all of the strictly attribution KPIs become less explanatory of that incrementality. So you can think of this as, again, clicks, purchase flow, purchases, revenue, etc. And a small note on clicks and searches. For us, that would represent a pretty small minority of incrementality. So they're not very well suited to fully capture incrementality. So starting at zero awareness, if you were to start a new company, obviously nobody's aware of your company. So it becomes very easy to see incrementality when awareness or upper funnel measures become considered. You can almost consider that 100% of your sales can be attributed to any incremental awareness. And subsequently, your incrementality almost is kind of perfect pull through, again, just starting out from nothing. But then as you reach like larger, mature companies, more like Domino's with high awareness, with substantial repeat business, et cetera, this really dilutes the effect and incrementality becomes super important. Other things that affect this are organic ads, earned media, word of mouth, bad PII, trackability, et cetera, are all going to make us want to favor incremental measurements. At Domino's, one of the things we are constantly striving to do is triangulate across multiple techniques, and I'll kind of try to quickly tick off how we're doing that at a high level. And what I do believe is that all of those techniques, they've all got strengths and weaknesses, so they're somewhat often going to mislead organizations away from the ideal. So we want to kind of have the preponderance of evidence point in the direction as we head towards it. And we're always seeking to unify those insights across the different methods. Again, those categories being media mix modeling, it compares across the channels. Controlled trials is going to eliminate substantial amount of noise and answer questions: are we getting more optimal? Are we making improvements? And then those optimization equation KPIs, again, they're definitionally good. So you want those KPIs all to point in the right direction. And then causal KPIs, again, they're definitionally good. And we want to cause people to buy. In each of these, how do we look at actually normalizing these and triangulating these? So I'm going to, again, start in that same order. With media mix model, because it's got that single normalized view of the business across advertisers, that's awesome for actually being able to compare and optimize. It does overstate lower funnel, so that's going to call for some further validation on those channels that are low funnel. Changes in performance can be observed by lift testing, so we can collaborate and triangulate with the directions that lift testing is moving and how the media mix results are demonstrating the value of a particular marketing channel. And another note is when lift testing can't reasonably reconcile, and lift testing or causal inference can't reasonably reconcile, that's going to cause you to want to do a deeper dive and determine which of those two is correct or where the errors are. In controlled trials, some triangulation that you'd want to do with GOX testing or other large-scale causal inference is, well, one, it does do a great job of getting that all-in value, and it's close to the MMM in terms of magnitude, a lot closer than lift testing would be. And we would want to use that when you don't have enough history or spend to include within an MMM. An MMM is going to need some level of history to learn from. So this is going to be one of those areas where you can really close some visibility gaps. With lift testing, we can think of this as providing the minimum value that a platform generates. And it can be used to prove that a channel is valuable. You know, if that minimum value is above a certain threshold, well, you know it's at least that good. And abnormally low lift tests can provide some evidence of underperformance and can be a signal that you might not want to continue to advertise in that particular channel, especially if you've got zero left. In order to triangulate and be apples to apples with MMM, there's going to need to be a substantial, additional scaling factor to scale up those results because again, typically there's going to be a heavy kind of downward pressure on the reported incrementality. In the optimization equation KPIs, those would typically be more enriched, at least for us, by the media team or marketing partners with future knowledge. The MMM typically, again, it's rear view mirror looking, and these KPIs can be current or you can potentially get some picture of where the industry is headed. So for the optimization equation KPIs, you can adjust MMM insights with recent changes in CPMs or changes in placement mix. So if you've got any shifts in placement that you're anticipating, those can also affect things like CPMs. For causal KPIs, future impression delivery can also give you insights into going from that rear view mirror MMM to a forward-looking estimation of value. Changes in platforms can also affect how you would want to calibrate your MMM. And then other causal KPIs, if you expect those to dramatically change in ways that the MMM can't foresee, you'd want to consider that. And finally, just wanted to give a quick run through on how Google's changes are going to affect companies like Domino's. We're not super heavily invested in clicks. We do use it in various areas, but it's not one of our primary tools. So this is going to much more affect, as was mentioned before, multi-touch attribution. The majority of our sales, again, being repeat behavior, is going to call for an incrementality measurement. Things like CAPI or other lift testing enhancements would definitely improve our ability to capture the incrementality because, again, we've got high repeat business and high awareness. And what I would say is, Apple, again, had already weakened a lot of the ability to attribute value to clicks. And depending on your business, that can be very material. So this was already kind of a case for moving away from a lot of these types of traceabilities. I guess personalization is also an area that is going to be fairly heavily impacted. I would say in general, again, talking to a lot of different advertising platforms, there's an increasing trend towards geographic experimentation or similar variants. This is much more popular now and continuing to grow in importance. We see an increasing reliance on some less than ideal KPIs, again, the causal or optimization equation. So there is a bit of a shift towards some of these less than ideal. What I would caution again, as I mentioned before, we need to take a holistic picture. And there's also an increasing trend towards more granular MMMs with higher frequency to try to accommodate some of the losses in information. Some side effects, again, of this privacy is there's going to be increased reliance on MMMs. This is going to end up aggravating the over-attribution of value of lower funnel marketing channels. So searches, clicks, etc., is going to be overemphasized as in the marketing marketing measurement industry as a whole. And there's going to be kind of a benefit for companies that have really robust login required environments even more. So, walled gardens are going to be, and those that have a lot of first-party data are going to be substantially benefited by this. So that was my content. Hope you found it somewhat entertaining and learned something. So I'll turn it over to the panel discussion.
Very good. Thank you so much, Samuel. That was terrific. I'd like to invite Matt back to join us for the panel discussion. And I have a few questions to start us off, but by all means, use the Q&A box if you want to ask any of the panelists any questions. So, Sam, you said you're not very reliant on clicks, and Matt, you presented data which says clicks aren't very reliable. If not clicks, then where will we go after third-party cookies go away?
Sammy, you want to start?
What I would say is, again, kind of in my last point, that first-party information and being able to tie that first-party information back to kind of more direct attribution is going to be increasingly important. So, people still have email addresses and they can still sign in with email addresses, and people do know who they have. Facebook, for instance, would know who's logged in, etc. So those walled gardens, those that have a lot of PII are going to be, unduly benefit by these changes. Also, again, increasing reliance on higher frequency MMM related solutions is going to be something that is going to be broadly seen.
For a particular brand, what kind of frequency for MMMs are you seeing today, and where do you think it might go to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tough. And there's going to be certain types of MMM methodologies that are going to be favored. Some of the more traditional MMM methodologies are not well suited for high frequency because they rely on a lot of historic information and kind of give a flat answer. Models which tend to favor time varying elements are going to be much more important even than higher refreshes, is what I would say. And it can be pretty difficult to say, oh, well, let's just crank up the refresh rate to every day. Really, an MMM being a top-down approach does need some time to learn. So not going to be as frequent. And that's where some level of triangulation is going to be necessary between the MMM, even a higher frequency MMM, and some other KPIs as we talked about.
I see. I've done some presentations with some major CPG brands, and they would imply, this is back a few years ago, but maybe twice a year they do market mix model or media mix models, and then much more frequently they do attribution, MTA. I suspect that will change. I don't know if they can handle 4 times a year or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's pretty typical, Paul. We see that type of cadence for a lot of brands. The issue is, of course, when you get the answer, it may not be relevant to things that have been executed recently. The guidance may be old. So we're doing monthly with most of our clients. We have some more sophisticated brands that want to move to weekly. That's still kind of unusual, but speed and refresh cadence is a key objective for a lot of brands, because they know that the guidance they've gotten historically has been the value's been reduced because of the delay.
And when you say weekly and monthly, would that be market mix models?
Yes.
If you're doing it at that pace?
Yes.
Interesting. What about differences in platforms? Will this affect the measurement of different platforms differently?
Well, the reason that the UK's competition committee is really taking a hard look at this, is because some in the industry are saying that this actually gives Google even more advantages as a player in the ecosystem. It in some ways makes brands more reliant on Google as a result. And so I think that there are platforms that tend to benefit. And Samuel mentioned those that have a high kind of first party or login rate will have advantages because they're able to identify the user session. I guess I would caution though, brands, this term incrementality is super important. Just because you're able to uniquely identify a consumer and the fact that they saw an ad does not mean that the ad had an impact. And that's kind of been the fundamental problem of attribution for quite some time. So in this race to get this identified kind of population, my concern is we're kind of back into this problematic mindset. But certainly first party, players with a heavy first party presence will do better. They'll be the winners on this change.
The $64,000 question is what do you feel about Q1 2025? Do we think we're going to see another delay, or do you think this is really it?
Ooh, if we knew, we'd all be sages. I don't. This is, I think, the third delay. If I were betting, I'd say it may not be the last delay, but it's a pause that gives brands a chance to kind of retool, which a lot of brands need to do. And I think if Google's intent on making these changes, they're driving forward with it. So if it gets delayed again, I don't think it means that it'll never happen. But they may have to kind of adjust their approach to meet regulatory demands. But I think it will happen. But wouldn't be surprised if it happens again.
My reaction to your statement about Oracle, which we know their members closing down advertising, and Nielsen closing down MTA, which I used to be involved with, it says to me that there's at least two companies that think this is coming on pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we think that there will be other kind of sector-based losses as well. That we'll see more of. I'm certain of it.
Sam, you talked about using types of geographical testing as an alternative. Can you go into a little bit more detail about what that is? We spoke the other day, and I mentioned that we do a privacy survey every year, and geography is sort of the number one issue that people are sensitive to. So how do you move ahead and do that and sort of stay on the right side of the privacy line?
Yeah, I mean, this is really entirely a privacy safe in terms of like sending data back and forth. It's quite privacy safe. If you have stores which are distributed geographically, and you can do a randomized control trial across those geographies, that does unlock the ability to, well, I guess the other premise is the ads have to be able to be served geographically as well. So provided you have those two abilities, then you can geographically test. We have seen some areas where ad serving cannot be reliably targeted geographically because of obscuring of IP locations and all that kind of stuff. That definitely could hamper the ability to do geographic-based testing, in as much as that targeting can be done, and again, the sales can be read geographically. That's still a pretty safe opportunity because no PII is transferred at all.
You pointed out an interesting statistical issue, and that is sales and clicks don't necessarily dance well together because of multicollinearity. But maybe speak a little bit more about it. I mean, an awful lot of those measures would represent multicollinearity in the typical regression models that you use, don't they?
Yep, absolutely. So, I think this could be an entire session kind of deep diving into media mix modeling and just any type of um, uh, modeling where you're trying to explain the multi-factor explanations of the effect of your marketing. Um, Clicks, searches, those are probably just the most, or furthest down the funnel, where they're kind of definitionally, at least again for Domino's, a lot of people will order Domino's just by searching Domino's near me, right? So because you have searched Domino's near me, as you're on the way to driving to get Domino's, they're kind of definitionally linked. So that is highly problematic. Not saying we've perfectly cracked, breaking collinearity. We do think Bayesian stats does help a little bit to be able to address some of that problem, but feature engineering is also kind of more important to being able to break out of those things.
Good points. Well, we're coming to a close. Let me see. I do have one question from the audience let me see if I can squeeze it in here. What will happen to companies without rich third-party data? Will the impact adversely impact the P&L, and how can they best mitigate risks?
Yeah, I think that would generally be true. You're at a disadvantage. It's interesting. I don't know if the market has kind of priced that in, but I think as we get closer, I think that reality will tend to set in, and you may see some public companies that take a hit financially, or at least from a stock price standpoint, if as kind of an early indicator. But yeah, I think there will be big investments made. It's already starting in building out better first-party infrastructure for brands. Certainly, the gold rush for CDPs is kind of reflective of this, and I think there's just much more investment that will be made to get out ahead of this.
Super. Well, our time is up, and I want to thank you for a really good technical session and a really good session that really portends where we'll all be going over the next year and a half. So thank you, Matt and Sam.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks to OptiMine for sponsoring today's Insight Studio. Be sure to check the ARF website for all upcoming events. And as you log off, you'll pop up a 2-question survey. We'd love it if you filled it out. Helps us make these sessions better. And enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one all.